The plasma bolt missed Marcus Chin's head by 3 centimeters. He felt the heat sear past his ear as he dove behind the ceremonial pillar, his dress uniform jacket tearing on the marble edge. Wedding guests screamed. The Valerian royal guard moved like water, shields snapping up around Queen Thessera and her daughter, Princess Lyria, who stood frozen at the altar in her silver wedding gown. Marcus didn't reach for a weapon. He had none. Humans weren't permitted arms at royal ceremonies, a rule he'd accepted when the invitation arrived 6 months ago. Instead, he assessed. 3 shooters, balcony level, southeast corner. Civilian crowd panicking toward the main exits, creating a crush. The princess's betrothed, Ambassador Krell of the Merchant Consortium, had vanished behind his own security detail. "Stay down," Marcus called to the elderly Valerian couple pressed against the pillar beside him. Their 4 eyes were wide with terror, their crystalline skin flushed deep purple. Another bolt struck the pillar, spraying stone fragments. Marcus grabbed the couple and pulled them lower, shielding them with his body. His mind calculated angles, trajectories, patterns, old habits. He'd been out of the war for 2 years, but his brain still worked like a soldier's. The royal guard was advancing now, moving in formation toward the balcony. Professional. Efficient. But the crowd was still in chaos, and Marcus saw what they couldn't. A 4-shooter, ground level, moving through the panic toward the dais where the queen stood. The assassin wore ceremonial robes identical to the wedding attendants, blending perfectly. Marcus moved without thinking. He sprinted from cover, using the panicking crowd as concealment, angling to intercept. The shooter raised their weapon toward Queen Thessara's exposed back. 10 meters. 5. Marcus launched himself in a tackle that would have made his drill sergeant proud. They hit the ground hard, the weapon skittering across polished marble. The assassin was strong and humanly fast. Not Valerian. Something else. They twisted in Marcus's grip with serpentine flexibility, striking at his throat. Marcus blocked, countered, used his weight advantage to pin them. Palace guards swarmed in within seconds, hauling the struggling figure away from him. Silence fell across the great hall like a blanket. Thousands of eyes turned toward Marcus as he stood, breathing hard, his jacket ruined and blood seeping from a cut on his cheek. Queen Thessera looked down at him from the dais, her 6-foot frame radiating authority, her golden crown catching the light. Her face was unreadable. "Name yourself, human," she said quietly. Her voice carried through the hall without effort. "Marcus Chun, your majesty. Lieutenant, formerly of the Human Colonial Marines. I serve as security consultant to the Human Embassy." He didn't salute. Different protocols here. The queen descended the dais steps slowly, each footfall deliberate. She stopped 3 paces from him, studying his face with eyes that held galaxies. "You endangered yourself for my protection." "Yes, your majesty. You had no weapon, no armor, no authority to act." "No, your majesty." "Why?" Marcus met her gaze steadily. "Because it was necessary." Something shifted in the queen's expression, too subtle to name. She turned to her daughter, still standing at the altar, her wedding crown slightly askew. "Lyria, are you harmed?" "No, mother." The princess's voice trembled slightly. "Thanks to the human." The queen looked back at Marcus. "The royal guard trains for 10 years to protect the throne. You acted in seconds. Explain this." "I was a soldier, your majesty." "Soldiers learn to see threats and respond. It becomes instinct." Marcus kept his tone respectful but direct. He'd learned that Valorians valued honesty above flattery. "The war you fought," the queen said. "The Kren insurgency. You were there when the colony ships were attacked." "Yes, your majesty." For 4 years. I read the reports. Humans are not the strongest species, not the fastest, not the most advanced. Yet you held territory that 3 other species abandoned. Why did you succeed where others failed? Marcus considered his answer carefully. The great hall was silent, thousands waiting. Because we understood something about fighting, Your Majesty. It's not about being the strongest. It's about refusing to quit. Humans are stubborn. We don't know when we're beaten, so we keep going until we win or die. The queen studied him for a long moment. Then she turned to her guards. Secure the hall. Find all conspirators. I want answers within the hour. She looked at her daughter. The wedding is postponed. Retire to your chambers. Princess Lyria moved gracefully down from the altar, but as she passed Marcus, she paused. Thank you, she said softly. You saved my mother's life. Up close, Marcus could see she was younger than he thought. Maybe 20 in human years, though Valorians age differently. Her eyes held genuine gratitude mixed with something else. Fear, perhaps, or doubt. Your Highness, Marcus said with a slight bow. When the princess had gone, escorted by a phalanx of guards, the queen gestured to Marcus. Walk with me. It wasn't a request. Marcus fell into step beside her as she moved toward a side corridor. Her personal guard followed at a discreet distance, close enough to intervene, but far enough to grant privacy. You know what today was supposed to be, the queen said as they walked through halls lined with ancient tapestries. A union between the Valerian throne and the Merchant Consortium. An alliance that would secure our trade routes and strengthen our position in the Galactic Council. Yes, Your Majesty. The invitations made that clear. Ambassador Krell fled when the attack began. The queen said flatly. He did not protect my daughter. He did not protect his guards. He simply ran. Marcus said nothing. It wasn't his place to judge. This attack was not random. The queen continued. Someone knew our security protocols. Someone knew exactly where to strike. Someone wanted either myself or my daughter dead, and they wanted it to look like we couldn't even protect ourselves during a wedding. She stopped walking and turned to face him fully. That same someone may have arranged this marriage in the first place. Marcus felt pieces clicking together. You think Ambassador Krell was involved? I think politics in this region have become more dangerous than most realize. I think humanity's reputation in the recent war has certain parties worried. And I think, Lieutenant Chen, that you just became very important to something much larger than a disrupted wedding. Before Marcus could respond, a young Valerian guard approached and bowed. Your Majesty, the princess requests the human's presence in the meditation garden. She says it's urgent. The queen's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Go, she said to Marcus. My daughter rarely requests anything. When she does, it matters. Marcus followed the guard through winding corridors and out into a garden that defied the grandeur of the palace, small and intimate, filled with bioluminescent flowers that pulsed with soft blue light. Princess Lyria stood by a fountain, still wearing her wedding gown, but she'd removed the crown. In the gentle light, she looked fragile and impossibly young. A small child stood beside her. A human child, no more than 4 years old, with dark skin and bright, curious eyes. The child held the princess's hand and stared at Marcus with unsettling intensity. Lieutenant Chen, the princess said. This is Zara. She appeared in my chambers 5 minutes ago. The palace is on lockdown. No one should be able to enter. Yet here she is. She paused, her voice dropping. And she says she knows who tried to kill my mother. She says she'll only tell you. The child smiled, and Marcus felt ice slide down his spine. That smile was too knowing, too ancient for a 4-year-old face. "Hello, soldier," the child said in perfect English. "We need to talk about the king you're about to become." Marcus's hand instinctively went to his hip, where his sidearm used to be. The child noticed and laughed, a sound like bells and breaking glass. Princess Lyria stepped protectively in front of the child, her jaw set with sudden determination. "She's just a little girl. Whatever's happening, we'll face it together." From somewhere in the palace, an alarm began to sound. Low and resonant, a tone Marcus had never heard before. The princess's face went pale. "That's the crown vault," she whispered. "Someone's trying to steal the king's crown. But there is no king. There hasn't been for 300 years. The child squeezed the princess's hand and looked at Marcus with eyes far too old. "Not yet," she said. "But there will be. By tomorrow, everything changes. The queen knows. That's why she let you live after you touched her daughter. That's why the assassins came. They're terrified of what you represent." Marcus stepped forward, keeping his voice calm despite his racing heart. "Who are you? Really? I'm the reason your species survived the Kryn insurgency," the child said simply. "I'm the reason you were invited to this wedding. I'm the reason you're still breathing. And if you want to save the princess, the queen, and possibly your entire species from what's coming, you'll listen very carefully to what I say next." The garden lights flickered. The alarm grew louder. And in the distance, Marcus heard the unmistakable sound of weapons fire resuming inside the palace. Whatever was happening, the attack on the wedding had been just the beginning. The child smiled again, sadder this time, and Marcus realized with sudden, absolute certainty that nothing about his life would ever be simple again. The princess looked at him, fear and hope warring in her expression. "Can you protect us?" she asked. "Even without weapons? Even if the whole galaxy turns against us?" Marcus thought of 4 years in the trenches. Of battles won by sheer stubborn refusal to die. Of the human instinct to protect the vulnerable no matter the cost. He met the princess's eyes, and made a choice that would reshape worlds. "Yes," he said. "I can." The child nodded approvingly. "Good. Then, let's begin your education in how to rule an empire you never wanted, fight enemies you can't see, and save a species that isn't even your own. The queen is waiting. And time is something we no longer have." She released the princess's hand and walked toward the palace entrance with the confidence of someone who'd walked these halls 1,000 times before. Marcus and the princess exchanged glances, then followed. Behind them, the garden lights went dark. Ahead, the sound of battle grew closer. And somewhere in the depths of the palace, an ancient crown sat in its vault, waiting for a human who'd never wanted a throne to claim a destiny written in stars he'd never seen. The meditation garden gates slammed shut behind them with a finality that sounded like fate. The child walked faster now, her small legs moving with purpose through corridors that Marcus had never seen, passages that seemed to twist reality itself. The princess stayed close to him, her breathing quick but controlled. She gathered her wedding gown in one hand to keep from tripping, and Marcus noticed the small ceremonial blade now visible at her waist. "Where are we going?" Marcus asked, keeping pace with the child. "Somewhere the conspirators can't follow," the child said without looking back. "Somewhere old. The palace has secrets, Lieutenant. Layers beneath layers. Your kind built their civilizations on top of ruins. The Valorians built their throne inside one." They descended a staircase that shouldn't exist, carved from black stone that absorbed light. The temperature dropped with each step. Marcus's breath became visible. The princess shivered, and he instinctively moved closer, offering what warmth he could. "You called me Lieutenant," Marcus said to the child. "How do you know my rank? How do you know anything about me?" The child stopped at a door that looked like solid rock. She placed her small palm against it, and ancient mechanisms groaned to life. I know you led a platoon through the siege of Arcturus Station. I know you held a breach for 16 hours with only 7 soldiers against a force of 200. I know you were recommended for the Star of Valor twice, and refused it both times because your team didn't survive to share it. The door swung open to reveal a chamber lit by crystals that pulsed like heartbeats. I know you quit the military because you couldn't watch more humans die for territory that didn't matter. And I know that right now, you're wondering if you made a mistake coming here tonight. Marcus said nothing. Everything the child said was true. The chamber was circular, perhaps 50 feet across, with walls covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. In the center stood a pedestal, and on that pedestal rested a crown unlike anything Marcus had seen. It wasn't gold or silver. It seemed to be made of solidified starlight, constantly shifting, impossible to fully perceive. The king's crown. The princess breathed. I've only seen it in historical records. It was sealed away when the last king died without an heir, when my ancestor became the first queen and declared the monarchy would continue through the female line only. Why? Marcus asked. The child walked to the pedestal but didn't touch the crown. Because the king's crown doesn't choose based on blood. It chooses based on worthiness. And worthiness is dangerous, unpredictable. Queens could be controlled through lineage, tradition, law. Kings chosen by the crown answered to nothing but themselves and the will of the empire. Your species would call them warrior kings. Leaders forged in battle, tempered by sacrifice. The ground trembled. Dust fell from the ancient ceiling. Somewhere far above, the sounds of fighting intensified. They're searching for us, the princess said. Mother's guards won't hold forever if this is a true coup. The child turned to face Marcus fully. When she spoke, her voice was layered, multiple tones speaking as one, and Marcus understood that whatever inhabited this child's form was not human, not Valerian, not anything he could name. The Merchant Consortium wants to absorb the Valerian Empire. They've been positioning for decades, buying influence, placing agents, waiting. Ambassador Krell was the final piece, marry into the throne, destabilize the succession, create chaos, then sweep in as saviors. They would have made Lyria a puppet queen and used the Empire's resources to fuel their expansion. But they didn't expect the human. The princess said quietly, understanding dawning. They didn't plan for someone to intervene. No one plans for humans. The child said with something like approval. Your species is too young, too stubborn, too willing to sacrifice for complete strangers. The consortium's analysis rated the probability of human interference at 0.03%. They didn't account for the fact that humans don't calculate odds when someone needs help. They just act. Marcus felt the weight of attention shift to him. Both the princess and the child watched him with expectation that made his skin crawl. I'm not interested in crowns or empires, he said firmly. I came to a wedding as a diplomatic courtesy. I'll help however I can, but I'm not becoming anyone's king. Even if it's the only way to save millions of lives? The child asked. Even if the queen herself asks it of you? The queen would never. Marcus started. Mother has been planning this for months. Princess Lyria interrupted softly. She met his shocked expression with sad certainty. Since she read the reports of the Kryn insurgency. Since she saw what humans could do when pushed. Since she realized the consortium was circling and she needed an ally they couldn't predict or control. Her voice cracked slightly. She invited you specifically, Lieutenant Chen. Not a diplomat. Not a politician. A soldier with a reputation for protecting others at any cost. She gambled that you were exactly the kind of person who would act when the moment came. Marcus felt betrayed in a way he couldn't articulate. So this was all theater? The attack, the wedding, everything? The attack was real, the child said sharply. The consortium moved faster than the queen anticipated. They were supposed to wait until after the marriage was sealed, until Krell had legal claims. But they sensed something shifting, something they couldn't control, so they struck early. She gestured to the crown. This was meant to be revealed to you differently. Gradually, with ceremony and choice. Now we have minutes, perhaps seconds, before the consortium's forces breach this chamber. And when they do, they'll kill everyone here and declare the royal line extinct. Can't the queen take the crown? Marcus demanded. She's the ruler. She has the authority. The king's crown rejects female bearers, the princess said. It's not prejudice. It's function. The crown bonds with warriors, and Valerian females are not permitted combat training by ancient law. It's archaic, but changing it would require years of political process we don't have. She stepped closer to Marcus, her eyes pleading. You've already proven yourself worthy. You fought without weapons. You protected strangers. You saw danger and ran toward it, not away. That's what the crown recognizes. That's what it chooses. The chamber shook again, harder this time. Cracks appeared in the walls. They're using seismic charges, Marcus said, recognizing the pattern. They'll bring the whole section down to get to us. The child looked up at him with infinite patience. The crown will protect its chosen bearer and anyone under their protection. But it must be claimed willingly. It cannot be forced. And time is over, Lieutenant. Choose now. Save them or watch them die. That's the only calculation that matters. Marcus looked at the crown. At the child who was something else entirely. At the princess who stood with the dignity of her bloodline despite her terror. He thought of his platoon at Arcturus Station. Of the choice to hold a breach he knew would kill him. Of the stubborn human refusal to abandon those who needed defending. If I do this, Marcus said quietly, I do it my way. No politics. No schemes. I protect the people who need protecting, and I don't play games with lies. Those are my terms. The child smiled, and this time it was genuine. Those are exactly the terms the crown requires. That's why you were chosen. Marcus reached for the crown. The moment his fingers touched it, the universe inverted. He felt the weight of an empire, saw the faces of billions, experienced the memories of every king who'd worn this crown before. They were warriors all. Some noble, some flawed, but all willing to stand between their people and oblivion. The crown accepted him with a warmth that felt like coming home after a war. It settled onto his head, and power beyond measure flooded through his body. His wounds healed. His exhausted muscles surged with strength. His senses expanded until he could feel every life in the palace above, every heartbeat, every breath. And he understood with absolute clarity what the crown demanded of him: protect the empire, not through conquest, but through sacrifice. Lead from the front. Never ask another to face danger he wouldn't face himself. I accept, Marcus whispered. The crown flared with light that could have blinded suns. The chamber stabilized. The cracks in the walls sealed. And, in the palace above, every consortium soldier collapsed unconscious, their weapons failing simultaneously. The crown's power rippled outward like a declaration, touching every corner of the empire, announcing that the king had returned. Princess Lyria stared at him with wonder. You're glowing! Marcus looked down at his hands. She was right. His skin radiated soft golden light, the same color as the crown. He felt different. Stronger. But also bound by chains of responsibility he'd never imagined. What happens now? Now we go to the queen, the child said. And you learn what it truly means to rule. She started toward a different exit that hadn't existed moments before. "Oh, and, Lieutenant, you can't remove the crown until either you die or find a worthy successor. Just so you know what you've agreed to." Marcus touched the crown experimentally. It wouldn't budge. It had become part of him, fused to his being in ways he couldn't fully comprehend. "How long did the last king reign?" 347 years, the princess said softly. "The crown slows aging for its bearer. You'll live as long as you're needed." Marcus closed his eyes briefly, processing this new reality. Then he opened them with the acceptance that had defined his military career. He'd made the choice. Now he'd live with the consequences. "Lead the way." They ascended through passages that bent space, emerging in the throne room where Queen Thessera stood surrounded by her royal guard. The unconscious consortium soldiers were being restrained. Ambassador Krell knelt in chains, his face pale with fear. The queen saw Marcus enter wearing the king's crown, and something complicated passed over her face. Relief, guilt, gratitude, and sorrow all at once. She descended from her throne and approached him slowly. Then, to the shock of everyone in the room, she knelt. The entire court followed suit, hundreds of Valorians dropping to one knee, their heads bowed. "Rise, your majesty," Marcus said quietly, uncomfortable with the display. "Please." The queen stood, and her eyes shimmered with moisture. "I manipulated you," she said bluntly, her voice carrying through the silent room. "I researched your history. I invited you knowing you would act as you did. I gambled with your life and freedom to save my empire." She removed her crown and held it out to him. "I have no right to ask forgiveness, but I offer you my throne, my loyalty, and my service. You are the rightful king. I will rule only as you command." Marcus took her crown gently and placed it back on her head. "I don't want your throne," he said. "I'm a soldier, not a politician. You are the queen. You've ruled for how long?" 112 years, she said. "Then you know how to govern. I know how to fight. So here's what we're going to do." Marcus turned to address the court, his voice firm. "Queen Thessera remains the sovereign ruler of the Valerian Empire. I serve as king consort and commander of military forces. She handles diplomacy, law, governance. I handle defense and security. We rule together, each doing what we do best. Anyone have a problem with that?" Silence. Then, slow, building approval. The Valerian culture valued practical solutions, and this was nothing if not practical. The queen looked at Marcus with something like respect. "You would share power? Give me equal authority?" "I'd give you greater authority," Marcus said honestly. "You've earned it over a century of leadership. I've been king for about 5 minutes. I'm not arrogant enough to think that makes me qualified to run an empire." Princess Lyria moved to stand between them, taking both their hands. "A queen and a king working together," she said softly. "Something our empire hasn't seen in centuries. Perhaps this is what we truly needed." The child appeared at Marcus's side, though no one seemed to notice her but him. "Clever," she whispered. "You found a solution that preserves tradition while changing everything. Very human." "Who are you?" Marcus whispered back. "Really? I'm the Empire's memory," the child said simply. "Its conscience. I appear in different forms throughout history when crucial choices must be made. I suggested to the Queen that she research human military records. I arranged for your invitation to arrive. I've been positioning pieces on this board for decades, waiting for the right moment, the right person." She smiled. "And you exceeded my projections, Lieutenant. Or should I say, Your Majesty?" Before Marcus could respond, the Queen addressed Ambassador Krell, who still knelt in chains. You attempted to murder the crown and subvert the throne. You betrayed the bonds of hospitality and peace. What defense do you offer? Krell's voice trembled. I was following orders. The consortium wants what's best for all. The consortium wants resources and territory. Marcus interrupted. His voice carried absolute certainty, the crown feeding him knowledge of trade routes, economic patterns, military buildups. They've been bleeding smaller empires dry for decades, moving slowly enough to avoid unified resistance. The Valerian Empire was their largest target yet. If they'd succeeded here, 36 other systems would have fallen within a year. The queen nodded grimly. Then, we must respond decisively. Not just to punish, but to send a message. She looked at Marcus. As king consort and military commander, what do you recommend? Marcus considered carefully. The crown offered him 1,000 strategies, each more aggressive than the last. But he was still human, still the man who'd quit the military because he was tired of bodies. We show strength without cruelty. Krell and his co-conspirators face trial under Valerian law. We publish all evidence of the consortium's conspiracy and send it to every system they've ever traded with. We form a defensive alliance with other targeted empires, making it clear that attacking one of us means fighting all of us. And we strengthen our military not for conquest, but for deterrence. He paused. And I personally lead a delegation to the consortium's home systems to deliver terms for peace. Face to face. Let them see what they tried to defeat. The queen's expression shifted to surprise, then approval. You would negotiate? Not attack? I'm a soldier, Marcus said. I know the cost of war. If we can avoid it while still protecting our people, that's always the better choice. But if they refuse peace, they need to understand that this empire now has defenders who won't break, won't quit, and won't surrender. That's the human contribution to Valerian strength. Queen Thessera extended her hand. Marcus took it. Together they turned to face the court, a queen who'd ruled alone for over a century and a human warrior crowned king in a single night of chaos. The crown on Marcus's head blazed with light, and he felt the empire's billions accepting him, their hopes and fears and dreams flowing through the bond. Princess Lyria stepped forward and spoke with her mother's authority. The wedding to Ambassador Krell is dissolved. The alliance with the merchant consortium is severed. The Valerian Empire stands independent, defended by the Queen's wisdom and the King's resolve. Let word spread across the galaxy. We will not be conquered, subverted, or broken. Any who seek peace will find generous friends. Any who bring war will find implacable enemies. The court erupted in approval, voices rising in a unified declaration that shook the palace walls. Marcus stood at the center of it all, a human who'd come to a wedding and left as a king, bound by a crown he couldn't remove to protect people who weren't his own. He thought of his old platoon, of the battles he'd thought he'd left behind. He'd wanted peace. Instead, he'd found purpose. The child touched his hand one last time, her ancient eyes meeting his. The hardest battles are still ahead, she said softly, her voice lost in the crowd's noise. But you're exactly what this empire needed. What the galaxy needed. A human who fights not for glory or conquest, but because refusing to protect others is simply not in your nature. Then she was gone, vanished as mysteriously as she'd appeared, leaving Marcus standing beside a queen who'd gambled everything and a princess who looked at him now with trust that terrified him. The crown pulsed with warmth, reminding him of his oath, his duty, his inescapable destiny. He was a king now. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, enemies who'd expected easy victory were receiving word of their failure, and the human warrior who disrupted plans decades in the making. Marcus smiled grimly. Let them come. Let them see what happened when humans got stubborn. Let them learn that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the galaxy wasn't the strongest or fastest or most advanced species. Sometimes it was simply the one that refused to quit, no matter the odds. The celebration continued around him, but Marcus's mind was already moving forward, planning, strategizing, protecting. The war he'd tried to leave behind had found him again, but this time the stakes were higher, and the cause was clearer. He would be the shield this empire needed. And he would show the galaxy what human determination looked like when given the power to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The Queen squeezed his hand once, a gesture of solidarity, and Marcus squeezed back. Whatever came next, they would face it together. A warrior and a sovereign, bound by duty and crowned by necessity, standing against the dark. It wasn't the peace he wanted, but perhaps it was the purpose he'd needed all along. And, in a galaxy that valued strength above all, he would show them that humanity's greatest strength had never been physical power. It was the stubborn, irrational, beautiful refusal to abandon those worth fighting for. 2/2